and they'll be like, well, how do we get this across? And just by getting rid of
No, too
this
many
one little
editors are
thing.
not constructive. Like you say, they go like, oh, this is wrong.
No, yeah.
And it's like, well, how should I change it? I don't know.
And that is
Right there.
censorship. Censorship, it just in a nutshell, is just that almost chosen ignorance that we're just not going to do that.
The knee-jerk reaction.
Yeah, exactly. And it is some brainstem.
And there's a lot of self-censorship too. Like you're saying,
Yeah.
before you even sit down to
Yeah.
write, you're like, I know I can't do this.
Well,
But you can sometimes. You know, if you're
Yeah.
clever enough, you can get away with moiter without being obvious about it. But
there's a very famous example in comics. There was a Steranko, Nick Fury page.
oh right, yeah.
With the pistol in the holster.
Yeah, the phone.
Yeah. It was like so. It essentially sold like full-on insertion. You know, whereas
There's a train
before,
going in a tunnel.
The panel in question was like, because of how his arms were, it looked like he was grabbing her breast. Is that what it was?
Yeah.
But instead, they just went for the train in the tunnel. And it ended up being, and again, that's someone who didn't have really the brain power. They just said no, and they ended up putting in something much more offensive.
That's usually how it is. Yeah, by trying to cover it up,
Yeah.
just make more of a problem.
Can I ask a question before we get down into the rabbit hole of I guess, too specific? Like, censorship's a really broad term, right?
Yeah.
It is.
It's a dirty word, too, because it
It
always
is.
implies something bad. So, I guess we kind of come from different fields, right? Like, I'm mainly in games, you're in comics, you're touching games now, you're in print, magazines, comic book stuff.
And I've done film and animation, so yeah, we get that too in TV, of course.
So there's different, like, I honestly think I've never been censored.
But-
However,
but at the same-
but that's because of maybe my definition of censorship,
Right.
right? So, to me, there is what you want to make as a creator. What you want to make something. I want to say this, or I want to show this, or I want to depict this, right? And then there's all sorts of social rules with what you can do, right?
Mhm.
Because some things make people go crazy, and you don't actually want to put those things
Well,
out.
you also got to be appropriate for your audience too.
Right. You want to reach an audience.
Well,
you wanna- you
and
wanna
that's
try-
where self-censorship.
the whole process. So censorship to me is an external party, not someone on the creative team. To me, it's not even traditionally an editor. It's like, so for example, in the UK, let's say you're going to make a movie in the UK. You call your
nasty.
production house. Let's say we shot a movie today and we're going to put it out in the UK. Where the word censorship would turn up would be when it gets submitted to the BBFC, which is where it gets certified, and they decide what it rates as, right? So it rates as an 18, a 15, a 12, a PG, or a U, going down from.
You for you person.
And there's different rules as to what you can depict in each. And these guys are just describing it, right? They're not telling you what you should put in it. They're describing it. And where you get censored is where if you go over an 18 mark, you can't release it, right? Like it's not going to go to the movie theaters. If you want a 15, if for some reason your company wants to put a 15 out and you've made an edit of something that's an 18, that's where the word censorship turns up. But it's kind of a negotiation, right? You're like, if you want the 15,
there's a
you've
leveling
got to
up. It's
remove
like,
this thing.
well, at a 15 you're going to get edited, but or at an 18 you're going to get edited, but at 15 you're going to get censored. You know, you are going to have things cut where they have someone that says, no.
But you're the person that cuts them to make the rating that you want to get.
Yeah, well, in America we have the MPAA,
Yeah.
and they
here's-
were like, oh, you can only use the word shit once,
No,
or
no,
you're going to
with
be an R
PG-13
film.
it's fuck one time.
Yeah,
so you
that's
got to
what I
make
mean.
it count.
So,
You literally got to.
I don't know if that's
You can only get one.
censorship, but you
Yeah.
limit it. Yeah, it's like only half of a nipple. Or
Yeah.
So I don't have a lot of experience with the movie groups. Like in video games, we work with a group called the ESRB in North America, and there's different versions of the ESRB
There's
in different
Peggy
countries.
and Europe.
Right. And the ESRB are fucking awesome. I gotta tell you, like as a consumer, when I first came into games, oh fuck ratings, now these things are gonna be bullshit. They're gonna tell us what we can do and not do. These guys just want you to describe your stuff, so that when someone buys it, if they go, oh, I don't like this, you can go, well, it's right here in this fucking box, man. It says what it's got. It says it's got crude humor, or it's got violence, or it's got blood, or it's got
no
gore.
different than the Library of Congress
Right.
classification system, where it'll say like nonfiction or fiction, horror, fantasy. You know.
So yeah, so it's just describing it, and their function. I think they see their function. Conversations I had with them years ago. They're really just kind of guardians of making sure that people don't get attacked for putting out something that seems like a Trojan horse, right? One thing I will mention about games, or maybe the way it does manifest itself probably most profoundly in games, isn't really the SRB. So, how many of you guys are gamers? Mostly gamers, right? So you're aware of all the ratings in North America. You've got E, you've got E10 plus. So E is like, you know, basic kids cartoon type stuff. E10 plus is somewhere, you know, you might have an exciting Warner Brothers cartoon that's maybe a bit like repeatable. There's that violence in there, could be an E10 plus. Then you got T for teen. T for teen can have graphic depictions of things, but for example, if you're doing a shooter, if you're doing a first-person shooter, you can't shoot ragdolls in a T game. You kill a guy, he goes down, he dies, he make fade away. You're not going to see brains come out. You're not going to see, hear him screaming. You're not going to set him on fire and have him running around, ah, I'm dying. That's not T. But you can have like.
You can do that in a comic.
Halo games are very close to a T. They're actually a really low M, but they're close to a T. And the M games are, well, they're 18 plus. They're for, I think 17 plus actually. They can have all sorts of things. You can have blood, you can have gore, you can have violence, you can have titillation. But did you know there's actually a whole rating above M which exists? Yeah?
Yeah.
Now, how many people here have seen an adults-only game?
One.
Oh,
I
what did you
can't
buy?
think of one.
What did you buy?
I didn't what? No.
Only the underage ones have seen it.
There's a whole rating called AO, which people, basically you can't buy easily because retailers won't carry it because it's this whole dangerous area. And so if you go and search for AO games, you'll basically get sex games. Is the sort of stuff I've seen. You occasionally see adverts or weird reviews on exotic websites. I bought this game in Japan, it's fucked up. That'll be an AO game. Anti-flasher.
It's all hentai stuff.
Right, exactly.
Yep.
So, is that censorship? I don't know. Like, I guess that's some sort of standards. Like, Walmart's
Yeah.
not going to carry the panty-flasher game.
Yeah,
Well, I mean, the history-
there's what I was talking about. There's editing, and then there's classification.
Yeah, the
You have to
ratings.
isolate what censorship is. You know, censorship is it's just a, and you also have to understand that a lot of people who decry censorship, for one thing, they run headlong in a wall they know they're going to hit, and then they cry censorship, and it's almost like the only good idea that they had in their project was that they were going to cry censorship. You know, there are, and this was actually a huge thing in the age of video, where remember when video boxes would come out and banned in 40 countries, video nasties.
Video
You
nasties.
mentioned that. Banned in the UK. You know, you still see it.
Banned in Boston.
And that, and they're like, well, we know it's not good, but we know we can get it banned. You know, and so there's that, which is
Well, it's ratings, sort of, and
it is, and it's playing against it.
I
yeah.
think ratings are a form of censorship because they ghettoize their classifications. You can't do an all-encompassing film or whatever. It's got to be for the kids or it's got to be adult. And sometimes it forces people, reverse censorship, forces them to put in swearing and nudity to make it a PG-13 because that's more marketable and stuff, you know? So that like started here in the 30s. Like before, in the early 30s, movies were really cool, you know? I mean, you could get away with all kinds of sleazy near nudity and all kinds of stuff, and the Hays, you know, the Catholic League and everybody freaked out, so they started the Hays Code. And, you know, kind of lobotomized films, but not as much as I think when the MPAA came up in the 60s and reclassified them, and it just screwed up films because then you're not writing a movie for, you know, the art of it or to be a good film. You've got to, you know, go through all this labyrinth and do this and
I'm
press that
curious
button.
because you seem pretty informed on this. Like, was the MPAA like a self-imposed thing, like our comics code was?
Yeah,
Okay.
it's
'Cause
all the
'cause if you-
studios.
as a fan of like drive-in movies and just all kinds of old film, because there was several versions of, like, there was the cat one. You almost always saw it.
With cat people?
No. The where it would be like the R for restricted.
Right.
It would be that cat that came across.
Oh,
It
right,
wasn't
yeah.
the standardized. See, now everybody has, and then there's also a color code self-imposed on
red bands.
I mean, yeah, you've got there's a when the trailer band comes
Yeah,
up,
if
there's
it's
a
green or
blue
red,
one.
yeah.
There's a green one. There's a
Green's
red one.
universal audiences, red is the.
Yeah, so even then they're subdividing it, and it wasn't. And I remember anyone in their like mid-30s. Remember when Red Dawn came out? That was the first film that I knew. I think they invented PG-13 for Red Dawn. I mean, that was the first time I had heard of it.
Yeah, it was around then, yeah, because
Yeah.
they were figuring like, yeah, we need something between PG and R.
So, and again, that in and of itself is not censorship, merely classification.
But as you were saying, like with the adult video games too, when they came up with the X classification, no one would distribute it.
Yeah.
And then they came up with the NR-17, and that was the same thing. I mean, when X first came out, there was an Academy Award film that was an X, Midnight Cowboy. And there were a couple films that were rated X back then. And they were classy art films, but then the theaters wouldn't show them. So, I mean, X became pure porn, and then they came up with NR-17, and they did the exact same thing, where it's like, we're not going to carry it.
And stuff like this, like ratings and I guess the rules around ratings are a moving target all the time because society is moving. Like,
country to country, or culture to culture is different. Whereas in
Right.
here, we have no problem watching insertion of a bullet from here, exit with the ejaculation out the back of the skull. Whereas, any sort of, sexual involvement, they're like, oh my God.
whereas Germany's flipped the other
Whereas
way.
the other way around,
Sure.
they will show full on, like penetration sex, but like
long history.
yeah, but like graphic violence, depiction of violence. No, like
Right. Well, even like in Japan, you can show incredible violence. You cannot show the nape of a girl's neck.
yeah.
That is
Well,
pornography.
they'll show the most stuff, but then they'll blur out or
And like the pink films and stuff like that, it's like they consider pubic hair pornographic. So if there's no pubic hair, if it's a young girl or shaved, that's not pornographic.
the nape of a girl's neck.
And they do stuff in their films too. Like if you ever see them cut a melon, that's supposed to be very suggestive. They just, it's a different world.
So I guess I was trying to go somewhere with this thing. Like I think where censorship tends to turn up is the crossroads between descriptors and action on descriptors. So like if a retailer won't carry something, that's probably the most profound effect of censorship. I think in games we saw a big change in the last 10 years because about 10 years ago there was some major retailers that would not carry endgames until Grand Theft Auto turned up and became a big hit with GTA 3.
Couldn't help it, they had to.
And then there was this huge amount of money to be made selling this game, and then suddenly, okay, I guess they're okay. I guess we'll sell
Oh,
it, right?
we make money, I guess they're okay.
I think where you get this kind of dangerous crossover is, I heard Jello this is a few years ago, so I'm probably going to get the details wrong. I heard Jello Biafra once go on one of his spoken word tours, and he was describing the big effect of tipper stickers.
Of what's
tipper stickers?
All right, the Tipper Gore.
Yeah, so
Oh, right, yeah,
explicit
Tipper Gore's the
lyrics
whore,
thing.
yeah.
So
You guys know this
PMRC stuff.
parental advisory stickers on
explicit content.
explicit content.
So you have albums which get sold, and then people would complain about the content. So the idea was, we'll put a sticker on it, and a sticker means you know what you're buying, and so you can't
And
complain.
people
Just
go out of their
sticker
way
it.
to get the explicit
Do you
stuff
guys
now,
remember
but the-
Marvel Max? Marvel Max comics? You remember we had a parental advisory slug on the cover? It was actually bigger than the logo icon, logo slug. That was a marketing, like we
Yeah,
wanted
it's
to
an
make it as
attraction,
big
yeah.
as possible, and that's really, Tipper Gore, who knows with that gal, but she ended up coming up with just another,
Racket.
another
Marketing racket.
another slug that you could throw on a cover and be like, I got to have it. Where it's like,
Well, the thing that Jello described was, he said that there was a whole secondary effect of this thing, which is you would get in certain schools or in certain areas you would get parental groups that would campaign around record stores saying, okay, we're going to make sure no one comes and buys shit from your store if you carry anything with the sticker. So then the sticker became a stigma, so it meant that you couldn't sell that shit. So the whole kind of social flagging of that, and then I guess the witch hunting and people selling that it's an unintended secondary effect, right? I think it's fine. I think it's
Oh, I think it's
appropriate to describe
intended.
stuff.
It's intended effect. That why would you put a thing saying don't buy this unless you didn't want people to
Yeah.
buy it? It's like
But
it's
I guess
counterproductive. It's counterproductive.
It's not saying don't buy it. It's saying this is what it is.
sure, yeah.
You should know what this is, so you don't get outraged if you listen to it. What the fuck is this?
Well, I also think that's the market co-opting the weapons of its enemy.
Right.
Where they're like, okay, we will put it on there, but all right, we want to do the wording of it, and we want to design it, and they're like, really, and be like, and you see the FDA does this too with food companies, but okay, we will put a marker on this thing that says it is adult content, whatever. But we want to, give us a little bit of time to work with it, and they're going to do some focus group shit, and they're going to look in, they're going to actually kind of sex it up, and they're going to make sure that when they put it on there, it is actually another marketing tool. And I think that's and I guess that is censoring censors. It's almost like a double negative, so that it actually opens the market up. You know, like I said, and this is really my original point, is that full-on real censorship is actually hard to come by.
Canada.
Well, yeah. And when you encounter it, it's a stultifying experience, because when you encounter it, it doesn't come with alternatives. Censorship is full-on redaction. You know, or we're gonna put it out.
Copies.
We're gonna put it out with the black streaks through it. I mean, it's that's censorship, and you're just like, why would you do that? You know.
Why? Okay, well,
It's
why-
because you don't have faith in people, you
Why
know,
did-
to make their own decisions, or to have, if they're kids, to have parental guidance.
Mhm.
You know, it's like, oh yeah, we can't, we're not in control of ourselves. We need a sticker so we know
Yeah.
whether we're gonna get offended or not. You know.
And a
So
lot-
what functions does censorship perform, right? Like, so
I think it's supposed to protect people from
Yeah,
something.
in
From something that'll
the Soviet
upset
Union
them.
would have, it's almost like minders, right?
Right.
And we all know how that all played out, but it's such an unnatural occurrence. You know, it's not natural to. I think that the same nervous tick that makes someone barf out censorship is the same thing that makes people like us create stuff that impels that behavior. I know that makes no sense, but like
The more you get censored, the more you want to do something.
it is,
censor-worthy,
it does.
yeah.
It's because
Oh, it's true, yeah.
because
I
it's
go out of
like
my way, yeah.
if you throw a rock in the stream will find a way around it. You know, and censorship is just this dumb rocks, and you will go through great extents to get around it. And the other part of my initial point was that's where an editor, there's editing involved, where often when you hit that censorship rock, that's often a point where you can actually start to get really brilliant with a story, and you can communicate the same content, and often more effectively and on a more resonant level than just like, I want to show the dick going in. Like you can show something, you can go to another place and actually get a much more resonant response.
Give
And
an example of that? Offhand.
offhand. Yes. All right. So I did a book called Nighthawk, Supreme Power Nighthawk, with an artist named Steve Dillon. And there's a scene where there's this Joker analog, a character called Whiteface, who is he has this. He is a homicidal maniac, and he is pawned himself off as this happy clown, and he's at a child's birthday party, and he's filling up balloons with poisonous gas, but he has two tanks. One is helium, and the other is this very toxic gas. And he fills up one with helium, and he sucks it in, and he makes this funny noise. And even though he's not a funny clown, he's actually a very scary guy. When he makes that funny voice, one kid says, "How'd you do that?" And the clown then fills up another balloon with poison, and he says, "Just breathe it in." And the last scene, that when it was scripted, in the original script, you actually saw children dying. And Steve Dillon contacted me, and he had an alternate take on things. And he said, "What if we just end it with him handing the child the balloon? And then when we pick up, it's already happened. And what you do is instead of showing the children dying and expecting your audience to feel that gut level response, open the next issue with someone with characters on the page having that gut level response. Readers are going to identify more with the people in that scenario, because one, it ends, and anyone who's had a kid, or anyone that was a kid, so basically everyone, like when he hands that balloon over, like that child is going to die. That's a hard pill to swallow. And
Well, that's one thing too about the older horror films and stuff. They leave stuff to the imagination.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm
the
a big
original
gore
Halloween
fan.
had almost no blood.
Yeah, I'm a
It was
gore
most-
fan and stuff,
yeah.
but you look at the older films and it's the anticipation of what's going to happen, and also if stuff happens off screen, sometimes your brain will come up with the most horrific image that you can imagine, which is often
And that's
more
it.
than the
Yeah.
artist can
And-
draw.
Exactly.
And he delivered what I didn't. Is that there are certain things that you want to play out in the theater of the mind that you are not going to be able to harness on the page. At least not in a language that everyone will understand. But if you tee it up so it asks that question and their
What
mind
happens next?
comes up with the answer, and yeah, they fill in the third act of that scene, you've
On a-
absolutely served your purpose.
On a
but-
similar level, it's like almost every Joe Kubert war cover is
Yeah.
like that, because it's the moment before
Oh, yeah.
the shit happens, and it's really good. It's intense, you know, as opposed to showing people
Yeah.
getting blown away. You got a guy like hiding around the corner with all these Germans coming or something, and it's like that guy's gonna get fucked.
One of my favorite stories about studios imposing control on something that relates directly to this, which is, have you guys watched the making of stuff on the Fight Club DVD? Anyone here watched that?
Making of what?
Fight
Making
Club.
of Fight Club?
Fight Club? No.
So Fight Club's a really good DVD. Sit there and watch that, because there's some really good dirty stories on there. There's two particular examples of things that the studio was like, come in and change this. And Dave Fincher's a really fucking smart guy and managed to twist their arm and get what he wanted out of those two things. So the one that relates directly to what you're talking about is the scene where, what's the guy called? Babyface, the guy's called?
Angel
Blonde
Face?
kid? Angel Face.
Jared Leto's character.
Right, so blonde kid, really good looking, and when the protagonist gets that guy down on the floor, starts punching him, knocks him out, keeps punching his face, and the original edit of that was shots of the kid's face getting punched, his teeth getting knocked out, he's unconscious, his face is getting ripped up, and the studio stepped in and said, no, you can't do that, that's fucked up,
Yeah.
that's got to go. And he said, okay, well, I'll do something else, and he went away and edited it. I think he had the agreement on both these two things that he changed. What I change it to, I will not change it again. I'm going to change it, but we're going to stick with what I changed it to. And they're like, okay, you can't do anything worse than this, right? So that's fine. So he changed it, and he changed it to the shot of when he started punching the kid's face, they cut away to all the guys in the room who are cheering to the Fight Club, and they all slowly stop,
Yeah.
and then they're like, oh shit, and they're all reacting, oh man, and they're sort
Yeah.
of turning away and covering
Like they've
their
act-
eyes.
yeah.
And because it's just like the comic effect. You're talking about the gutter between the panels,
Exactly.
the distance between the issues. You're now the one punching the kid in the face, and you're imagining what's happening. And let me tell you, that's always worse than seeing it. It's
Yeah.
always worse, because you're the guilty one trying to film it. Like, oh shit, what's happening? Oh man, I don't want to see it. I don't want to see it. It's worse than seeing it.
Yeah, you're for one thing, it's a fairly it's a masterful take on it, where because you establish that you have a crowd that's thirsty for blood. They're they're sated. Now it's going too far, and Fincher's take, it's that extra second where like the cup runneth over, and it's like now you're actually deeply ashamed of yourself as a human being, now it's got down to a Catholic shaming, to where it's just like, oh my God, and again it comes down to resonance, and it's one thing when you're watching a film, it's rubber appliances and Caro syrup, and in comics it's just paper and ink and stuff. But if you can move it into another region, if it's a deep moral question, that's when you've really got the hooks in. And another thing, I've watched the same thing, and I've also read extensively about it. I'm a big Chuck Palahniuk fan. Like, Fincher and Palahniuk were definitely on different ends of the spectrum on what they wanted to show. Because Palahniuk felt that he had explored all of what Fincher wanted to explore in the book. He didn't see the reason, he didn't see the rationale of making a film, making a spot-on reinterpretation of the novel. He wanted to see the other things. He wanted to see people's faces getting smashed apart. And this is, again, where, as a creator, you're never going to know. Sometimes, and I guess sometimes you have to hit the censorship rock to make your story better.
Right.
Ideally, it's not censorship, and it's an editor or a collaborator, or showing something to, I've got a draft and I shoot it up to Eric and be like, can you objectively look at this and kind of, give me your read on it. And that's anyone who's has a creative plan. If you want to move forward being a creator in whatever field, collaboration is key in a lot of these things, because if you're creating something for people out there, there's writing for yourself and there's writing for an audience, and you have to start as early as possible with your creation and start handing it out to an audience, because that's going to make for a better product at the end. Because it's not about just you; it's you telling a story to them, you know. And again, you might hand a story or a draft or whatever to someone, and they're going to hand it back and they'll say, "I didn't read it," and you'll ask why, and they'll say, "I just didn't want to," and that's censorship. When it's just stop, and then you're like, wow. Then you have to look at it. You're like, what made them stop? You know, like, can I ask you at what point you stopped? And a lot of times they will not give you a clear answer. You know, why? If you ask around, I guarantee all of you know someone who will not watch The Exorcist. All right? Now, and there's a reason why. Like, it's not that they believe that what is on the film is true, it's because it asks questions they don't want to ask themselves. You know? And so a lot of times when you hit censorship, it might be, you always are going to need some triangulation on it. It might be because it's actually very good, or it might be because it's just a total fucking turd. All right?
Well, I think when you freelance too, and you're working with licensed characters, that you don't have a free hand. You know, you have existing characters working for a company. If you're an auteur and doing it yourself, or created a character of your own and own a piece of it, fine. But you know, obviously, the publishers are going to have a vested interest in their properties, and you know, don't want you to have, you know, Spider-Man ripping people's heads off and stuff like that. So
yeah, a lot of times the censorship happens even before you get involved.
Right.
To where, and anyone who's worked on you say like a licensed property, all the censorship has been done. A lot of times they'll be like, and you know this happens, like, all right, we want to do, and I was actually involved in one of these, but we have I got approached by a publisher that had gotten the rights to the IP, all of the old, like these 70s icon porn films, like Behind the Green Door, Tell 'Em Johnny Sent You, like all that stuff. And but the idea is that they had a marketable, identifiable brand, but they're like, well, we don't want to do porn. We just want to kind of, people know the name, so we want to use that as the entree to, you know, actually telling a different story, you know. and believe it or not, there is some logic behind this.
Sure.
It sounds bizarre, but the fact of the matter is, all right, Richard Branson is not involved in Virgin Music or Virgin Mobile. You understand? Someone bought a license. They bought that license, all right, because it's a known brand. It has nothing to do with him. They just paid him to put Virgin on it. Virgin Comics. That was Deepak Chopra's kid, you know. Behind the Green Door. What was that one? Deep Throat. They actually did it. They actually made a comic of this.
and it wasn't porn.
And it was not porn. Yeah.
Is it about Nixon?
Yeah. So a lot of times you'll actually, it's marketed as being, you know, here's this edgy content, but it's actually already been very pasteurized.
Denuded.
Yeah, denuded before it got to you.
I think, Eric, you had some experience with doing the Incredible Hulk: Ultimate Destruction, correct?
Yeah.
Did you have anything like that before you went in, making the character, like any sort of guidelines going in?
I guess. So we made the Hulk movie game and tied into the Iron League movie,
Oh, right.
which was a very quick kind of turnaround. Like, we have to get this out for the movie thing, and I can't play that game at all. But then we made Hulk Ultimate Destruction, which was an open world game, which was much more of a fun game, and they can still play that one today and have fun with it. So you're asking the question, how does censorship manifest itself?
I mean, did you have any like they were talking about licensing,
Limitations
like
or
limitations?
parameters, yeah.
I mean,
I'll tell you one thing that turned up with that, and maybe I can bounce this over to Dan, but like, what the weirdest thing was, when we turned in scripts, there was like we used words like damn and hell, and there was definitely flags going, oh, it's a comic book thing. You can't say religious things in there. Is there guidelines for you on like religious words?
All right, here's the thing, and I mentioned this earlier, is that no one wants to write down a list of things that you can't get away with, because project to project, all right, if De Niro wants to write a Marvel comic script, you know, we don't want there to be these rigid guidelines that is going to make that impossible. All right, it's case by case. So, to date, at the moment, I think there was one hard and fast rule in Marvel Comics: is no smoking. I take that back.
Let me tell you the origin of that.
If you're gonna smoke, you have to die. It's almost like in slash films, like if you have sex, you're going to die.
Right. No, let me do a sidebar here and tell you the origin of that, because I was at Marvel when that smoking ban started, and before you came here, I was mentioning that the censorship now and what I've experienced isn't like the blue-nosed old ladies going like, oh, you can't do that. It's the young hippies now that are censoring, and it's PC censoring. And what the smoking thing was a great example of it. I was at Marvel. They got one letter from a kid saying that Nick Fury and the Thing and Wolverine are smoking in comics, and that's not cool, you know. So there was an edict: no more smoking at Marvel. Turned out the kid's dad was a big anti-smoking advocate. You know, the kid was like 7, right? So like he obviously set him up for it and everything. So one letter, and you can't use it as it's a great character prop. You know, like as an artist myself too, it's like, you know, you've got a panel of the guy's head, it's good to have a stogie or something. And it gives character to Ben Grimm and Nick Fury and Wolverine especially and stuff. And I mean, come on, Wolverine, his lungs can heal.
Yeah.
He ain't gonna get sick from it, so.
That's a very fair point.
So, you know, that's we're getting a lot of PC stuff, and that thing with the smoking, it just really pissed me off when I was there. I was just like, that is just so pussy-ass.
Yeah.
Like, one little kid's letter, and it just, it doesn't make sense. People smoke.
And I think that's something that doesn't get called out and pulled, you know, out in the light of day enough, is that the concept of PC is censorship.
Big time.
And it's self-imposed. And all right, did anyone remember when Roots was on TV?
Roots.
You know that Roots would never get made today. No fucking way.
Blazing Saddles, too.
Well, just the concept itself is that, you know, when they made Roots, they're like, let's get every black actor and put them in this. I mean, and look, we're probably still in the window to where every black actor that you know was in Roots. I mean, literally, if you look at the
Any over
credits.
40.
Yeah. That in and of itself would be regarded as racist today. All right, you would never have him on screen. I want free. You'd never fucking see it, you know. And back then, it was actually that in that time period was a huge expose. It was like some sort of penance that we were paying at prime time. Yeah, that we were finally like, oh, we're gonna just come clean with it, and this happened. You know, now we're in like this state to where, like, almost like a Soviet state,
blacks
where
can
it's
only
like
be doctors or psychiatrists in movies now. You know, they can't be gangsters.
and they're like,
Well,
so you're like, well, I have this slave epic, you know, and they're like, and some executives be like,
can we put it on Mars?
do they have to be black?
Yeah, can they be green?
You know, that's kind of a touchy subject now. It's just like, no, it was.
Well,
and
when
then,
you go back to like Twilight Zone, is that like that's why Serling went for the fantasy, because he couldn't sell scripts about real issues, so he could do, you know, metaphors and parables with the Twilight Zone as, you know, monsters or aliens.
I think, yeah, the radio era actually really, I think, was the crescendo of that, where everything was a parable. You know, where I think, and that's really why there was that surge of sci-fi in the late 40s and throughout the 50s, is that someone figured out that we could finally tell all these stories and ask all these questions that we had this deep yearning to receive answers for, but do it in science fiction.
Fantasy.
And, you know,
There's some really good interviews with Rod Serling on censorship. And him explaining
Oh, there's
censorship.
on YouTube.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's tons.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really
So
good.
go home and just watch all of them.
Yeah, you shouldn't have come here. You should be online.
See you guys
watching
later.
He used to smoke on TV.
Oh yeah.
I think I read a book, either it was a book or maybe it was one of his files in there. It listed on his TV's Last Angry Man. And he was explaining
I don't know,
exactly
there's
his own
some
experience with, like he'd write some story about, some slave family on the run, moving across the country, and he'd go, well, do they have to be flagging it? Do they have to be slaves?
Does it have to be America?
Do they have to be on the run? And you'd end up
Yeah.
with this happy family in the middle of
Yeah,
nowhere,
right.
nothing happening.
It's
and,
like, that wasn't
just
a story.
nuts
Yeah.
with it.
Does it have to be a TV show?
Well, you mentioned a few minutes ago being censored by hippies. Do you want to talk a little bit about
Damn hippies.
about Vex and
isn't it
Occupy?
fucked up to where it went from, the baby boomers, have just held on with they refuse to go away, and then and
They're dying off.
and it's but now that they're finally dying off, like this new regime of this, the proto hippie, or no, the post hippie, to where they've compromised to the point of just being. There's no point to them. There's no point.
Yeah.
There's
But you
nothing
guys,
there.
have you seen this newspaper I do called Vex? Because it's a weekly comic newspaper, and we do corny articles and junk like that, and did some tongue-in-cheek editorials where I write this thing that's sort of like a Lou Grant type nut, and so I wrote an editorial about the public square in Portland on Congress Street. Saying, because the hotel wanted to expand in it. My office is right across from the park, so every day I see people peeing, shitting. I see cops, rescue units, fire trucks come 3 times a day, and then by the time they get there, the bums are gone or whatever. I'm sorry to use the word bums, but they're bums. And so I wrote an editorial. It's like, come on, let this hotel expand. They're not taking the whole park. Let them expand. It'll create jobs. Have fun, revenue, all this shit. And so what happened is the occupiers didn't like my editorial. So they went and stole copies of my paper, put stickers on the cover, and put their own editorial inside it that was, calling me, personal names, how I'm like a rich guy from away and all that stuff.
An elitist.
I know, right? Yeah, elitist asshole, yes, thank you for
Okay.
reminding me.
Yes.
Yeah.
I thought it was shithead.
That too.
Okay.
And so that is kind of censorship when they steal the shit off the stands and put it on there, and that's just it. It wasn't about nudity or violence or this or racism or whatever. It was like freaking stupid article about a park, and they got all bent out of shape. And so that's what I'm saying. It's more coming from the new blue noses, which are like, oh, we gotta save Earth before we save the people.
And I think it's there's this classical the what you envision of censorship, where there's a bunch of white men sitting at a table like this, and they're just like, no, and they're like, this is unacceptable,
stamp.
and it's not that. It's someone who ought to fucking know better. And they're reading through it, and they're actively looking for something.
Exactly.
To,
if it's their job,
to cut out. Yeah,
that's
as-
the worst
as if
part.
it's
Where
their
like,
job.
we gotta find something.
Yeah,
I know so many writers, and there have been so many people in TV and everything that will put in something offensive on purpose, so that these fuckers will go, this is gonna go.
Yeah.
And it's like, meanwhile, they got something else there.
I was having this
Slide through.
conversation. I was flying back. I was out on the West Coast doing some video game stuff in San Diego, and California is a very strange place, and you don't know how strange it is until you really start to see how the sausage is made. And so you have Southern California. You think of Southern California, you think dude, we're gonna surf, we're gonna eat a fish taco, it's so laid back, but it is the most, it's so red state.
Restrictive. Yeah.
All right, so then you go up to NorCal, San Francisco, where you're thinking Haight-Ashbury, gay pride parade. Here is something, and actually, the Seattle chill is very similar, but you will overhear someone say this in San Francisco. If there's one thing I can't fucking stand, it's intolerance. Shit you not.
Except it's usually
And you just sit there and you're
It's
just
usually
like,
upspeak. Against intolerance.
what? And you're like, what the fuck? What are you saying? You know, whereas down south they're cool with everything when it's like, I just don't like faggots.
Yeah.
And you're just like, what? You know, like they're cool with
Well,
everything, and they're
that was
just
the
like,
thing with my paper,
I'd
is that-
just rather just homos were all dead. I hope, you know, I'm glad AIDS is here. You're just like, oh, what?
No, but you got the Occupy crowd that came after my paper. They were like way into diversity, unless they disagree with you. It's like everyone should have a chance to speak unless we don't agree with you.
Yeah.
So I mean, you know, that's diversity to a degree, and that's some pretty harsh censorship too, where it's like, you can't do that, man.
Yeah.
I'll tell you, I was in Southern California when they passed the no smoking, you know, in clubs and bars and restaurants. I didn't smoke until then. I started smoking at Solidarity at 30. I managed to live my whole life without smoking, and I was just like, fuck them, I'll show them.
No, and in like some suburbs, like even in like homeowners associations,
Oh,
like if
yeah.
you're smoking in your car, you know, and
They're banning it everywhere.
Yeah, they'll be like, and
There's smoke-free buildings in New York. There,
Oh, yeah.
you know, there are people in neighborhoods suing
Seattle's
the neighbor
like
up the
this.
street because I can smell their cigar up the street.
Seattle's funny. They're smoking ban, and I was a hardcore smoker for years, and I finally quit.
Good for you.
But they have this thing. It's like you can't smoke within like 60 feet of an entrance or an
schools
exit.
or anything.
Essentially, the only place you can smoke in Seattle is like in the middle of a 4-lane highway, like within the city limits. So and what that does, and this is where censorship will always come back to bite. When you create this, when you put that unreasonable, when you present censorship, when you put that just hard block in, it antagonizes equally irrational behavior. Guys will start smoking at 30. You know, it'll become like you're anti-establishment if you do these things.
If you do things that you could have done 40 years ago,
Yeah.
that you're not allowed to, like eat a burger or some shit.
Yeah. Oh yeah. You see that now. It'd be like, you know, and now you have.
No, like with the cigarette.
You'll
thing.
have. It'll actually be a marketing tool for someone to be like, we make the highest calorie hamburger in America.
The heart attack and everything.
Yeah, and that is, and again, it's grabbing the weapons of your enemy, and ultimately it helps no one. You know, it's probably not even all that good a burger, and you know, so I think, and this is what I was trying to figure out when I was walking down here with my horrible hangover, is that when actually Eric contacted me about this panel and about censorship, and he asked me if I'd been censored, and yes, but it was like, what I wanted, the most important thing that I wanted to get across is that when you encounter it behooves you to decipher what it is you're seeing. Why was this censored? Was it, was it, why did it happen? So kind of look at it, kind of circle it a bit and consider it. You know, don't just say, oh, it was censored, so therefore I am compelled to consume this product. You know, it could have been built to be censored, and it's not any good. It could have been a project that was put forward and hit censorship and then was out of steam, and therefore you're going to be very disappointed with it because it's something that could have gone beyond what it is. And censorship, it quit. You know, if you in your personal life, and I don't know how many people here are, you know, either currently or have plans to work in a creative field, you know, when you encounter it, you really have to, and again, it behooves you to, like, look at the person or the circumstance or the situation that has brought this censorship out, and, you know, look at yourself, look at your project, you know, because it is a massive red flag, you know, and it's, you have, and it's, is it a question that, has this put forward a question that no one wants to witness the answer to? Or is someone put forward a question that no one gives a fuck about? You know? And I think it's really important. You know, don't, and he brought up a huge point. It's not what it's, this is not the Hoover era. This is not, you know, a red under every bed type of censorship. That's not what it is nowadays. Now, PC is censorship. It's just it's terminology. You know, politically correct it's like jumbo shrimp, or what are those things? Military intelligence.
It's an oxymoron.
Yeah, it's an oxymoron. You know, politics are meant to be combative. You know, all right, that part, the Latin part of that word means like it's supposed to be multifaceted. You know, you're supposed to consider this shit. It's not something that gets teabagged right there. You know, just don't. It's a tool used. It's the enemy's tool. Don't let it be used against you. All right.
I think on that note, we're up for a couple of questions. While you have a couple of minutes, yeah, go for it.
One thing I find interesting is that, you know, movies and books and all that stuff is censored, but there's, I mean, not just censored, but ratings. Ratings are, there's ratings on movies, and there's ratings on video games, and there's warning labels on music, but there's nothing for books. I mean, like paper.
Right.
There's no kind of rating system or anything.
You want to know the
for
sad
content that's
fact?
in a book, and the only
Is
way
that
you'll know is what's in it is if you read it. And I found that interesting that.
Well, I mean,
book
books have
ratings
been
on
banned
genre
over the
games,
years.
There's nothing on books.
You
Well,
know,
there are
books have been
genres.
banned, but you know, it's like
Well,
you don't
there's
need lists.
and you know what the question. So the question is why.
So
And the
like,
fact of the
what's-
matter is
First
all right,
Amendment.
All right, how many of you people have a bookshelf in your home? All right, good on you. When you go in someone else's home, it's the first thing you should look for. They have a bookshelf. It is something that you can buy plenty of bookshelves at IKEA or whatever, but you notice that like they're like for other stuff other than books.
Yeah.
They still call them
Vase.
bookshelves. All right.
No,
The
but
fact of the matter
everything
is,
you
if
mentioned-
there was more money in books and if more people read them, and if there was an upside to, you know, to making a circus out of that, someone would.
No, in every other medium that you talked about that has ratings, it's self-censorship.
Yeah.
It's fortunately it hasn't been the government stepping on stuff. Even there's government involvement and stuff, but you know, fortunately it hasn't been. And books, you know, and newspapers are supposed to be, you know, it's all First Amendment, and you know, we should be able to do whatever the hell we want. FCC steps on TV shows because it's broadcast over the air. It's supposed
Well,
to be cable,
it's an active passive thing. You know, TV is you know kind of it's fed to you, or you know, really any motion entertainment is it's just simply put out there. It doesn't require interactivity. Whereas books, daily it becomes harder and harder to find the damn things. Even though, and God bless libraries and librarians, that they're still, you know, keeping the flag in the sand. That not only do they have all the books, they're fucking free. You know, but
Nothing's free.
Well,
the
you have to pay for it there.
and that's why, and I can't remember who said it, but there's a
Hitler.
great line. It's like, you know, we hide that knowledge in books. You know, like it's all in there, and if you ever, there's so much out there that's just been written down, and that's the stuff that the
Right.
reason that it doesn't get censored is because someone would actually have to go and read all the words on the paper, and
I also
it's
have
too
a
much
theory
work.
that all technology is inspired and excelled by pornography. 'Cause I think right after the Gutenberg Bible, someone was printing up a porn book, and that's what sold VHS. It's what sold the internet. And it's like all technology, all mediums.
Wasn't that that was a conversation in Tropic Thunder, right? That was the first time that came
Betamax
out.
versus VHS?
Yeah, when like like
What was the porn better?
no,
than
no, it was
VHS?
Blu-ray versus DVD.
Blu-ray versus
Yeah.
HD DVD.
Yeah.
Porn industry went with Blu-ray. Blu-ray won the
Uh-huh.
format one.
Yeah. And I think that's right. And again, it's
It's like, anyone seen those Tijuana Bibles? Came out with the comic books, and then they came out with dirty. That was in the 20s and 30s. And,
Well, shit, you know, like if you look at cave drawings, you know, not a lot of clothes, you know. Like if you're gonna draw a picture, you'd be like,
That's what I mean. It's like I think all technology, like forget even Gutenberg. Yeah, cave drawings. Like,
Yeah.
look, I drew a woolly mammoth. It's like
It's
I'm
got
gonna-
boobs!
I'm gonna put a boner on it.
So they invented writing to describe sex.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
I
Sure.
think officially we are over time. Does anybody else have a? Do you guys have a couple of minutes? And do
Yeah,
we
sure.
have
I'm okay.
questions? We got.
I gotta go have a cigarette.
I was just looking through my Hellblazer trade the other day because I'm all upset about the fact that
it got canceled. Yeah, how about that?
And I was looking to see why Warren Ellis's run was kind of cut short.
Are you talking about shoot? You
What's
talking about the school
Hellblazer?
shooting one?
Oh yeah, the school shooting that he wrote a story that involved the school shooting, and right before basically they were gonna publish it, Columbine happened.
Mhm.
So they shut it up, and that really pissed him off, and he ended up leaving.
Well, Axel Alonso, who's now editor-in-chief of Marvel, that was one of the last things that he edited at Vertigo before he left. And the fact of the matter is, it was Warren who pulled that off the shelves.
Really?
Vertigo was willing to go forward with it because it's actually a very thoughtful story, if any of you have ever read it. And by the way, so we're in Maine. I'm assuming that Stephen King's still a big thing. you know that he wrote that it was part of the Bachman books, or the one where the kid goes to school and makes all these preparations and goes into school with a gun. All right, you know the story? You know, that's been out there for the longest time. And whereas Warren Ellis actually was the one that said, I don't think it's the right time to tell this story. And Warren will tell you if you ever have a chance to ask him. Whereas Stephen King was furious with his publisher. He wanted to get the thing that short story reissued in its own, just as he wanted it put out as a pamphlet for like 99 cents. Because he was so enraged that there was all this news coverage about the shooting and not about what leads up to that. There was no exploration. There was a post-mortem, but there was nothing addressing why there was this complete despair that led to this action. And if you ever read King's book, the story, it doesn't really add much to it, but it at least starts putting questions out, you know. Which is, take from that what you will. The Warren is a strange fella. Like, you know Warren, right?
I just look like him.
Yeah. You know, Warren, one, he's a really prolific guy, and he is extremely canny with publishers. It's really, you'd have to be really goddamn brilliant to censor Warren Ellis, because he knows all the tricks. And, all right, for instance, all right, Transmet, you guys read that? Do you ever notice that Derek Robinson's art on Transmet doesn't look like his art on any other project?
No, yeah.
Well, the reason Warren would keep scripts till there was absolutely no time to draw the issue, so that when he turned it in, there was no chance that anything could get changed because they had to go out the door. All right? Now that is a power play move, and you have to understand, Warren wasn't a big deal when Transmet was going on. All right? So again, he had grabbed the weapons enemies to use against himself. Is that I'm sure they would have liked to change some of that stuff, but they didn't have time, and they had a deadline, and they had to get shit off to the printer, and Derek had to have time to draw it, and if it was something that Warren was fairly certain that they were going to have a problem with, it would just come in like 3 pages at a time, you know, and like literally Derek would be like drawing the last panel, and it'd be like in the poor editors would be like, it was Stuart Mort at that time. He's like, we're going to lose him if we don't have something for him to draw. It'd be like, well, here's 1 page. You know?
As an editor, that would piss me the hell off.
And it would just, and the whole thing would be done. That issue would be complete, and the next one and the next one, and Warren would just be like, well, here's another page, you know, and he would just trickle
Here's
it out.
panel 1.
Yeah. So a lot of times, and to further explain, you know, to kind of exemplify how smart Warren is that he will bait censors. You know, he's not above.
Push it.
Yeah, he will push it, and he's very much, you know, he understands the value of shock. But when it came to shoot, it was just such a heartbreaking occurrence. And I don't even, Warren didn't even have, he has a daughter, you know, and that, for whatever reason, it just cut close to the bone. And, you know, while we were shooting, our kids were, you know, shooting each other in schools, you know, in the late 90s, and they had a lot of, say, it probably sounds not as important to us, but there was a ton of knife violence in the UK at the same time. And I think I think he felt that it needed to be told, and then when the whole sad thing got unwrapped on in the global media, he was just like, he just didn't want to play ball, you know. So he pulled it back. It's just like, you know, it's just not time. But you know, as we all know, the story eventually came out.
Yeah.
And when it did, I think a lot of people were actually disappointed. Like, I think they were thinking that Warren had written a story that said
it.
like the kid was right, you know.
Yeah.
They should have, you know.
He was a hero.
Yeah, and it didn't. You know, it was actually a fairly moral tale, you know. So, and again, it's when someone, I'm not convinced that DC didn't, in a very kind of forward, you know, long con kind of way, you know, I think they made a point of, you could have never heard about that story. It's very easy for them to just not talk about it. They spoke about it for a reason. They mentioned it and they said they weren't going to publish it. You know, and that in and of itself
demand
is,
for it.
yeah.
Exactly.
And they kind of got some buzz going about it. And I think the reason that they took so long to basically put it out is because it built up so much that they knew what the story was, and they were like, this is kind of taking a life of its own. And if we just put it out now, like, people are going to call bullshit on us, you know, because, like, you know, as anyone who's read it will tell you, it's not that, you know, insane, you know, it's not that strange, that story that justifies it or glorifies it in any way. And I think that's the only reason gap between them mentioning it and then actually putting it out. Because when it came out with little fanfare. They just kind of squeaked it out because they're like, well, we fucking paid for it, so better publish it. You know, but I think it was more about marketing the brand, you know, vertigo on the ledge, you know, than it was about that single story. So
I just want to say quickly too, I think I mentioned it briefly, is that the only real censorship nowadays in comics, like overt, is Canada. And I wasn't kidding. It's like comics that go to Canada from Asia and even America, they get stopped at the border and confiscated, and it's a crazy world. When I was doing Cracked magazine, I also did a monster magazine, and it got stopped at the border because Canada still has horror comic and crime comic laws, anti-crime comic laws on the books from the 50s. So if they wanted to, they can just screw you up. They can just fuck you up and go like, oh, this is a horror comic, confiscating it, you know. So we had a bit of a problem with them. We also had a problem with Canada with Cracked because we were made fun of. We called them a third world nation, and they were like, we won't allow this into our so you know, that just made me make fun of Canada all the more. You know?